Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Stu and the Nun here on this May 8th. We are episode 361 on this one, and bringing back somebody from episode 220 about 5 years ago. We got Chief Warrant Officer 5 retired Bobby V. Who's Bobby? I guess you would say it Bobby Villarreal. Villarreal? How do you say it?
Roberto, it's actually Roberto Javier Villarreal, so that's official
All right,
name.
we'll keep with Bobby V.
Yes.
We like I say, last had you on about 5 years ago, within probably about a month of that, and good to have you back. And it's been a minute. You've been retired a few more years since then, so I want to welcome you back to the show, Bobby. Thanks for coming on, bud.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back, and it's a different time now. It's
Yeah,
good to be back.
a lot has passed. We looking back now to what we were thinking. We had you on before, what was going on, and looking back now, we realized, what were you thinking? Why were we? Why did we
Yeah,
go through that? But we are definitely a lot smarter than we were back then. But
exactly.
yeah, so you are a 160th pilot. You've done a lot in your career: Army Ranger, pilot, warfighter, multiple deployments. Um, you've seen accomplishment. How long were you in the Army in total?
In Army, it came down. It was 32 years total because I was medically retired and I was trying to get back in, but they wouldn't let me back in. I could have done advisor stuff, but I didn't want to do that. So ultimately, yeah, it was 32 years, but right at 30 years of active duty service.
Okay, and you saw and did a lot and have been, I'm assuming, pretty active ever since then.
Yes, it's. I tried. I did some flying when I got out. Um, I did medevac training. I did went to the medevac training. Flew for a company out of Walterboro, South Carolina. But it just wasn't for me. When you come off of a lifetime of 100%, 12-hour shifts, it's just death by 12-hour shifts.
Yeah.
7 days on, 7 days off. Day one, one shift is days, and then the next 7 days is nights, and it's not good for the body, and it's good for young people, but once you retire, it's not a life like that for someone like us.
Was it the adrenaline at the same level, or was that something you were missing once you retired from somewhere like the 160th?
Well, yeah, you would get the adrenaline when you get the missions, and of course, when you go through the training, one of the first things they do is tell you, nothing's worth your life, and it's almost like they kind of deter you. They suck you dry out of that gun hold, I guess you would call it, that what you were trained to do. They basically slowly just take it out of you, and it's just like they're just there collecting a paycheck,
Right.
and that's what it turns into. And that's why I just kind of it didn't work for me,
Yeah.
and that's really what it came down to.
Because it wasn't really about the paycheck. I mean, it was just it just didn't have the same fire.
Yes,
And
didn't have the same fire. It just you would try to go out. I could, with my experience, I can fly through the weather and go around weather and stuff. But then you go, you take the mission and you go out, and all of a sudden you get calls from the headquarters going, "Hey, you sure you want to do this? Are you sure?" Yeah. And it's just you know what? If they're calling you from from upstairs, it's time to like, okay, you know what? Yeah, you're right, and just then you go back to sleep. And then and the worst part about it is you're in a new aircraft and you start going. The whole thing is you're training and you want to fly to become one with the aircraft, just like anything else. But when they're constantly only flying 7 days, you only fly a half an hour. You lose, and then you start. You know, you don't learn the aircraft well, and you're out there just working with buttons and turning on the auxiliary power unit just to stay proficient. And I was just like, this ain't for me.
Yeah. So what have you found yourself doing since then? I mean, you tried that. Have you just been enjoying retired life
Yeah, I did. One of the things where I really messed up, and I'll say this to anybody who's looking to retire, is when you get out, don't do anything. Absolutely nothing. Just get your head straight, figure out what you want to do, come up with a plan, come up with a contingency plan, and then execute and never fall in love with your plan. Because that's what really was a deterrent for me when I started flying right out, getting out of the army. It was I should have not done anything because I wasn't seeing what was around me and was really enjoying, people around me, the time that you lost in the military. When you get out, it's time to enjoy that time that you missed with your kids and with your family and doing the stuff that you missed for all the years that you've done. But the problem is you become numb to enjoying stuff that you just want to work, 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 work. And you want to have something to do, but in reality, you need to train yourself to do nothing at first and then figure out what you're going to do. So a lot of things I did, I renovated my house. I bought a condo, renovated it, little piece at a time. I bought another condo a couple times, about 40 miles from here, renovated that, and basically focused on doing stuff I've never done before, like home projects, you know, pouring cement, building a fence, stuff that I never done before in my life. Started doing that, and you actually learn to you learn to appreciate the stuff that other people do. you know. And you get away from that mentality of one of the things that I really noticed when people retire is they always say, "Oh, I was in the army." And somehow in some of the conversation, you can meet somebody and they're ready to tell you that they were in the army or they were in the military or stuff like that. I force myself not to do that, to try to step away from that. Just I'm just who I am, and if they would have a conversation would start, but they would learn well later in a conversation. Oh, you were in the army. Oh, wow, I didn't know that. You don't look like somebody in the army. I'm like, because I try not to act like I was in the army.
Right. Did you ever have people guess it? I've had people I got into an Uber in Dallas about a month or two ago, and literally just got in the back, and the guy was like, "Where'd you serve?" Like, "What'd you do?" And I'm like, and I'm looking around like, "Did I have a shirt on it?" And I was like, "What hat am I wearing?" And and I had my sunglasses on or whatever, and I'm like, "How'd you know I was in this?" He goes, he was in too. He had been and he deployed, and he'd drive me from the airport, and he's like, "Sunglasses, the way you're standing there waiting." He goes, he said, I saw it. I'm like, Okay, fair enough." But
Yes, usually one of the things was physical posturing,
yeah,
because you can tell the difference when you put a civilian next to a military person. It's just shoulders are back, head straight. You look at everybody in their eyes. I mean, you don't. You just bring an aura of respect that's required. One thing I get, they call me old man here, but it's more of a respect thing. They call me viejo. They call me viejo. You know, and it's always si viejo, like yes viejo, yes sir. But it's a term of respect. You know,
right.
or they call me viejon. You're the viejon. Or chief, not chief, but they'll say what's the other word that they call me here is jefe. Like,
Yeah,
because I look like a jefe. You just look like somebody in charge of something.
right.
you know, and it's the younger guys always, no matter where I'm at, see jefe, yes sir, yes sir. I'm like, oh wow, I don't expect it, but it's just, people tell me you just have that military posturing.
Yeah, I
That,
used to my work, I used to fly a lot, like 80-90%. I was traveling every week on the road, and I had people, because I flew a lot, and they just see me. I would have, and this was probably in about 2003, 2004, a couple of years after 9/11, they would come up and just like, "Hey, thank you for what you're doing." And I'm like, I'm in my khakis and polo, and I got my computer bag. They're like, they'd be like, "I know you're an air marshal." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "No, I'm not." I'm like, "Okay, you're well." I'm like, and finally, after sometimes the same people I would see, they'd fly a lot. And finally, I asked the guy, I'm like, "Why do you think I'm an air marshal?" Same thing, how you carry yourself, how you're sitting here at the gate. I see you every week. I'm like, "Well, I see you too." He goes, "But I know I'm not." And I'm just like, okay. And I had friends of mine because I flew so much. They were like, "You're really an like undercover air marshal, aren't you?" I'm like, "We hang out together. What are you talking about? I do computers." They're like, "Sure you do." I'm like,
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of the stuff, and one of the things for people who are ready to retire is like change your wardrobe. Like everything, the first thing you got to do is whatever you have, your khakis, your polos. Like if you don't want to be related or kind of people not identify as military, it's the way you dress, really. A
that's the
lot of it's the
guy
way
in the
you dress.
WMIA shirt.
Yeah, that's right. And then, for me, it's just I just happened to go to the gym today and put this on, and I was actually gonna change, and because I didn't, but I was like, ah, well, I'm already late, so I'm just saying, but
Yeah, it's funny. I went to overseas to Australia and India a couple years ago, and a few years ago, and I was packing, and same thing, right? Situational awareness, right? Your posture and all that stuff. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going to look like an American. I'm not going to. We were. I had to dig hard and deep to find clothes in my t-shirts and stuff that did not have an American flag on them, something military, some kind of. It was like and I've been retired since 2009, but a lot of friends that own military t-shirt companies that we hang out with and stuff, and I had to look hard deep, like I gotta find something that does not say soldier or America on it, and it was I realized then, like, I probably need to change up a few things.
yeah,
um
and I had to. I mean, a good friend of mine, Tyler Merritt, owns Nine Line Apparel, and me and him were really good friends. He was my platoon leader, and I watched this company grow, and I got a bunch of free stuff from him. So my people who knew me, I gave a bunch of that stuff away, brand new stuff, because everything I had was American flag,
yeah,
Nine Line Apparel, kill 'em all kinds of military stuff, and it was yeah, I had to get rid of that. Like this, I have very, very few shirts now, and usually they're just my work shirts that I use just around the house.
that's
And
funny you say that because Enlisted Nine Fight Company, my good buddy Colton over there runs it. He Nine Line makes all his shirts for him. He moved over to him, and those are my gym shirts too. That's what I wear all the time. But Nick over at Ranger Up and all that stuff, I have drawers full of their stuff.
yeah,
But a lot of stuff from Colton, and just from Enlisted Nine Fight Company, because it looks the same look, same flag, a little bit different logo on the left shoulder. That's all my gym stuff for sure. That's same thing. Everyone knows there, kind of knows who I am, but yeah, it's hard to find. So you've been out for a while. A lot of things have happened, not only since we last talked, but since you've been retired. A few in the aviation space. So I would like to get some of your attention. You got a few years on the stick there, and a lot of flight hours, I know. And as we look back over this, um, last few months, I mean, there's been some crazy aviation accidents and things like that. And I would like to just get your thoughts and feelings. Right after the one that happened in the Hudson, we had we had a good friend Taco on, and he's a pilot. He's a fixed wing pilot and flies big jumbo jets and stuff. But um, I'd be interested in your thoughts on as more info has come out on that. I talked to some friends of mine that were, Kiowa pilots and pilots in the Army about, how does the whole tail get cut off and stuff. And they told me how sometimes on certain birds, the pitch can happen enough that they too big a vigorous maneuver on a two bladed bird that it can come down and cut the tail boom off and stuff. But I was just wondering what your thoughts are oh, we lost your video there.
hold on, it's coming back to us.
Uh,
Sorry.
yeah. Oh, I lost you completely. Okay. We'll give him a second to come back on. Um, and I know Rob is watching. Oh, here he comes. All right.
We have thunderstorms, so I'm kind of
That's
I
right. Yeah, yeah. But
so
so as you look back at this, we've learned things. Any thoughts or opinions or just what you've heard or learned in the aviation community about what could have possibly happened with such a terrible accident of the full rotor coming off and everything?
Yeah, well, first of all, the one I want to speak to first. I mean, I know there's a lot of, why the one that happened in Washington, where how
Oh,
can a helicopter get hit by you know, how can two aircraft just meet in, big space, little spot, One of the things that people forget and they'll be NTSB will figure out. I used to be a test pilot for the Army, so the 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 aircraft that was flying over along the river, he was supposed to be at 300 feet, and he was actually whatever altitude that they came up, 350 feet. One of the things to remember is that he was flying a radar altitude. He was not flying mean sea level, which is what, of course, the plane's landing, so he's thinking everything's in front of him. He's not flying an AGL altitude.
right,
And one of the things that people don't know, is the error correction, or the error allowed for radar altitude for a military aircraft, is plus or minus 80 feet. So just in itself, plus or minus 80 feet, he's already off altitude, so he was
right,
80 feet above it. So he could have been, yeah, and they're flying around and not paying attention. The rate altimeter is going up and down, and there's a plus or minus 100 feet correction that you're allowed during an evaluation. Because it's constantly moving. So imagine plus 100 feet off, which is within limits in your evaluation, plus another 80 feet that the rate altimeter is off. So of course he would have been within the flight path. But I think that was one of the biggest issues with that, and they'll learn it and they'll figure it out when that occurs.
so
Because a
you
lot of friends
you
ask
mentioned
me,
that, but most recently they just came out with the NTSB release that I'm assuming from the cockpit voice recorder, maybe they had in the Blackhawk, that the IP had given her instructions 15 seconds prior to pilot to make a left turn because the aircraft was on approach.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so people are like, "Oh, okay, he told her." But then the question is, why didn't he force her to? Like, why did she keep flying for another 15 seconds straight? How did were they distracted because of the lights? Because of this, and obviously, there's so much speculation, but that was pretty enlightening in the last. I think that came out a week or two ago that she was actually given the order to make that turn and not keep
yeah.
flying.
But one of the things that they could have, he was making the turn, but he could have been past the. Basically, it was the plane's coming in, but he just passed the flight path. So when she turned back into the flight path. That makes sense. So she
Yeah,
makes a turn. The plane's coming. She's still moving forward, but making, instead of like making a 90-degree turn, it's a gradual turn.
right, right. It's not they're not
It-
pivoting time.
yeah, I mean, he may have told the instructions, but they were still flying into the flight path. I don't think he realized his altitude. I mean, he made the correction, but the altitude could have been off. I mean, they're flying whatever they're flying, and just didn't realize. I mean, there's a lot of things that could have happened there, but people were talking, well, how can they be so far off? One of the things that radar altitude could have been, plus or minus 80 feet.
Yeah, and there was a lot of talk afterwards about why they're doing these flights around such a busy airport, so on and so forth. And then most recently, we just I think a such story just several days ago of two flights that had to get had to do fly arounds because there was a helicopter coming in over the Pentagon. That again, maybe now the air traffic control is being really overly cautious, or maybe it really flew in the path. But that was the second. There's been another one since that accident where they had to divert a plane because of a helicopter, and then the other day it was two planes got diverted or maneuvered somehow out of the area because of a helicopter flying up over the Pentagon.
Yeah, another thing to realize with these military helicopters, the antennas are down in the belly of the aircraft, like the UHF. So when they're talking, they can hear, but they can't transmit. Especially when you're UHF. UHF radio is awesome when you're up in the air, because it goes a long ways. So usually pilots will talk VHF on the ground because the antennas are on top, so the communication is back and forth. But if the controller is busy, the pilot will call on UHF. So sometimes there's just it's lack of the aircraft not receiving.
Right.
And the UHF is basically in the Blackhawks. It's hit and miss. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. They have an amp that sometimes goes out, and the aircraft is an alien aircraft, and it's got old stuff in it. Sometimes it just doesn't have the oomph to receive and send. So VHF is more used than none, but A lot of it's communication, and they're flying 200 feet AGL and below.
Right.
So they're not line of sight because there's 100 buildings between them. So that a lot of times it's communication. They'll get their clearance and they're flying around, and they'll get somebody else's clearance. I mean, it's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
It does occur. I mean, eventually it's just becoming more and more, newsworthy information. So it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, but in Iraq and Afghanistan we had hundreds of helicopters and flags coming in and out. We didn't have that issue, you know.
Right.
So
Well, let me ask you one thing that came out was, I know when I first heard about it, I was like, man, well, before they even talked about them having nods, I was like, I wonder if they were flying nods, because all I could think about is all that ambient light from not only the city, but on both sides of the river. You've been in DC, I know enough to know. I mean, coming south on the Potomac, going by the Pentagon, going by, I mean, I would think they would not want to be flying nods until they got clear of some of those lights. It seems like they would just be flashed out.
that's correct. It would be. They were probably not flying. They were more than likely they were in and out. So obviously they have their nods, but you can. I mean, all you got to do is pull them out, and you're just flying under your nods. But you still
Yeah.
have them in place. You're just don't. You're not using them. I mean, because you
Right.
can. There's been plenty of times where you can fly under and look under, and all you got to do is just glance up, and you can see under. And more than likely, a lot of during those times you fly under, and you're not. Your NVGs are worthless. Especially
Right.
with all the
Yeah.
you get white out.
Yeah. 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 I know there was a lot of, news speculation over that of like they had the nod. Well, yeah, they could have had them in the aircraft with them. Doesn't mean they had them strapped right to their eye. They could have had them flipped up or looking at, like you said, anything. But I couldn't imagine them doing it, even if they were doing a training flight. The flight, in my opinion, just wearing nods enough in other cases would be. I mean, they would essentially have blinded themselves. So I couldn't see them doing. There's no training value in doing that
No,
because
there is not flying NVGs in the urban community. I mean, that's not what they're for. So
yeah, I can imagine even sometimes over Baghdad or over some, cities you've been deployed to sometimes, using nods in some of those cities was probably, pretty tough with the,
well, we like I said, you can still have them on,
right,
but you're looking under them because I mean, you just adjust your head slightly and you can see everything. And
right.
obviously, when you're flying, you're looking straight, and all the lights are down at the bottom. But if you can look up, it makes everything clearer, obviously on the air. But when everything's just so lighted up, you're basically flying. You know, un, it's aided, unaided, so it's kind of a term that we
Yep.
use.
Yeah. The, yeah, interesting. So when we look at was there anything else on that one you want to highlight for our viewers and listeners, just that maybe they didn't know or didn't realize on that accident that we know
I,
so far?
the biggest thing is because they were talking the whole altitude thing. So aircraft over the Potomac is an AGL altitude. It's, you know, 200 feet AGL. It's the route,
Right.
the route that they're going. So if the rate altimeter was off by 80 feet plus, you get a plus or minus 100 feet that you could travel in. That's why you have that corridor. I mean, it's the error was there, and obviously an accident happened. But it's people need to realize they're flying instruments. They're using their equipment to navigate. So it wasn't like they just flew the out. I heard a lot of reports where they were just doing whatever they wanted. And obviously there was an instructor pilot and somebody with them. And instructor pilots, if anybody's ever flown with an instructor pilot, they are some on point guys. You know, especially if you're getting evaluated, they don't mess around. So
Yep.
it could have been a lot of, and plus the radios are going crazy and stuff's going on, and you know, she was probably getting an evaluation or something was going on. It was a training flight, so there's constant communication, stuff's going on in the cockpit,
That's what
so
something when I heard, yeah, when you have an IP with you and you're going through that and kind of getting recertified, you're being graded and tested, no matter how many hours you have. And that was one of the things I wondered was just, with that added stress on and all that kind of stuff, where some people second guess themselves. They're kind of worried about what they're seeing or hearing, and they're hesitating. Yeah, I mean, there's so many that not that that was a reason or fault, but I when I looked back and evaluated some of it, I was thinking that could have been a contributing factor of being nervous about being, rechecked and getting a check
right,
flight, just not being comfortable and just knowing how to fly the plane, but worrying about what's being looked at on you and that kind of stuff. Having
right.
gone through it, imagine especially when you were probably a younger pilot, that probably was very nervous when you only had a few hundred hours or so under your belt.
Hey, even as a W5, when I had a young W2 IP, trying to make a name for himself, he's putting the boots to me. He's gonna hold me to the standard, and
Right.
go to this plus or minus 100 feet, plus or minus 50 feet, plus or minus, they hold you to it.
Right.
I wouldn't expect them to do any less. Of course, when it comes, you have to have, and you also as an instructor pilot, also have to ask, okay, did he get enough sleep? Did he get enough food? Is he rest? Was he nervous? How much time he's got in the aircraft? When was the last time he was in the aircraft? There's a lot of factors that take place in that. So,
Right. Yeah.
but anyways, the second one, the one of the 206, I was actually watching the Fox News when it occurred and when the first film came out. And the first thing I noticed was that the aircraft was inverted, no rotor system, no tail, and basically just falling out of the sky.
Yeah.
You know, and I was just looking at it, and I actually like took a picture and blew it up. And then I was looking, I was like, man, that's a 206. It's a Bell 206. And I was thinking to myself, man, that's the same aircraft I flew in flight school.
Yeah.
Yeah, after 1995, the Army was in flight school was flying the Bell 206. It was the aircraft that actually had the accident was a Bell 206 Long Ranger, which is the same thing. Is basically the same. It's a 206 that we flew in flight school, just longer. It's almost like flying a Jeep or driving a Jeep Wrangler with 4 seats and then getting the extended, or the 2 door
Right. And then go in the 4 door.
Wrangler to a 4 door. It's the same
Yep.
same thing. It's just longer. Basically the same thing. So it has the same characteristics. But one of the things I realized, I looked at it and I was like, out of all the years of the training that the 206 has been used in flight school and all the auto rotations, that has never, ever, ever, ever happened in flight school. Ever, ever. I mean, obviously they do auto rotations to the ground, you have the emergency procedures. And the most common incident that ever occurred was the skids get bent because you hit the
Yeah.
ground too hard,
Yeah.
you know. And the 206 is the same aircraft as the OH-58, just the
Right.
military version of it.
Yeah.
So it's a sturdy aircraft. I mean, it's not like this. It's not like a Robinson where it's just got this little thing of a tail boom with it's just sturdy. I mean, they put the boots to them in flight school.
Right.
But one of the things that they were talking about, or that they read, was that the aircraft had run out of fuel while it was
Yeah.
flying.
They had mentioned it. Yeah, you're right. They did kind of talk like he was surprised because he was doing his flight. He had
Hmm.
just left it up. Like, hey, I got to stop and get almost like it had been losing fuel or something. But or obviously this guy was a very competent pilot, former Navy SEAL,
Hmm.
and these tourist flights, and he wasn't up long. He made the turn up at the upper end of the Hudson and turned out, and he was called in like, hey, I'm going to get down and get some fuel.
Right.
Um, I wondered if that when they said that, it kind of stuck to me too. Going, you're going to do your pre-flight checks. You're going to fly this. You're doing these runs all day. He probably did them all the time. You're going to make sure you got more than enough fuel to do this, and probably the next couple. You're not going to let yourself get so low that it's going to be a point of being an alarm while you're in flight when you're doing a
Right.
10 minute.
But a lot of times these flights are hot loads. So he just came off of, I mean, I don't know what the flight log is going to tell the story, how long he
Right.
was in the air. So he just loaded, back and forth, or maybe he was just carrying him and was headed to go get fuel and then
Right.
do his tour. But the gauges could have been off. That's another thing. You were looking at your gauge. It's an electric gauge. There's those things do have errors. Plus or minus 50 gallons or 50 pounds. He could say, "Oh, I got enough time," but the system could have been off. Our tanks in the Blackhawk, you have 180 pounds correction or fault that you can still the tank's still in good condition. You know, so it's one of those things that you never when you have the blue lights blinking or the lights blinking, it doesn't mean you have 200 pounds of fuel, and that's in the that's one of the things. For example, in the Blackhawk, when you had blinking lights, you had basically 15 minutes of fuel or 200 gallons or 200 pounds of fuel. But
Right.
as a test pilot, what I do is I look at when we do the ground runs, and one of the checks is the engines. I have to wait for the engines to fail. to make sure. And I've had the blue lights come on or the lights come on and the engine fail. I get the low fuel lights come on and then the engines fail right off the bat when I'm supposed to have another, 200 pounds of fuel, another 10 minutes or 15 minutes, something to get you to land.
Right.
So that's when you have to go back to the gauges and figure out and readjust the gauges. So when the last time those gauges were reset, who knows? I mean, if it was even done. So that could have been a problem. But the key, the one thing, he was a pilot that was well versed in the area, confident. But I think one thing about the 206, it's a semi-rigid rotor system. Basically, it's a teeter. It's just two blades, one in the front, one in the back, and it rotates. So it just does this. Unlike in a Black Hawk or the other aircraft, which are fully articulated, which each blade is different. Well, when this one goes up, this one goes down. So if you're cruising around and the cruising airspeed for the 206 is 110 knots, so he takes off, he's cruising around, all of a sudden he gets an engine failure. The first thing you're supposed to do is collect it slowly down. I mean, in a moderate way. You don't want to jerk it down because what happens is you put too much of a load on the rotor system. And then what you're supposed to do is basically pitch the nose up and get that airspeed down to get that glide going to start the auto, maintaining your rotor or your engines at 100%, so that when you go to do the flare at the bottom, you have enough centrifugal force to allow you to cushion the aircraft to land safely. But a lot of times when people have engine failures, the first thing they do is collect it down and jerk back on the rotor on the aircraft to get the aircraft into the airspeed. So if you think about it, he's flying 110 knots. He's got to get down to 60 knots. So he pitches it up and he did it so abruptly because it freaked him out. He basically it seems like he cut his tail, boom, because the rotor system came down, cut it, and the aircraft basically just with no rotor system, the engines weren't on. So because when it was falling, the engines weren't on, the engines were out. So there was no
rotor was gone.
So the rotor was gone, but there was but the rotor system was still been turning. If there was an engine, if the how do I say this? If the engine was on, you would have still had the rotor system running. As it was falling, it would have been turning. Even if it didn't have blades, it would have had whatever left of the blade, but it didn't. It was basically because the aircraft is top heavy, it just fell down. So the only thing I can think of is he abruptly pushed back on the cyclic to slow down and put the collective down too fast because it freaked him out, and he broke his own tail rotor because one of the reports said that first everybody heard like a big bang, and then all of a sudden this thing fell. So the bang would have been cutting his tail rotor,
right?
And then all these pieces
who flew Kiowa for Kiowas for years, and then fixed wing in the Army, and now is a JetBlue pilot. We were talking that day or right after, and that's and flying Kiowas. Obviously, he knows that airframe. And the first thing he said is those two bladed ones, he could have cut. He could have same thing you just said. He could have pulled that collective too hard and cut his own tail boom off. Now, if that would have happened, would that have broken that full main rotor blades off?
Yes, it would have cut his blades in pieces because he. So when you you want to do the collective down and then slowly, because the aircraft, when you put the collective down, the aircraft's going to pitch up automatically because the aircraft, it's got no more power, so it's gonna pitch up. So his instinct was to collective down, engine failure, and then it was already pitching up, and then instead of you're supposed to actually push forward on the cyclic to get the aircraft nose, stable out the airspeed, and then slowly start pitching it back. But everything happened so fast that the only thing that could have happened was he cut his own tail, which is known for that because in flight school they were big on that. They were really, especially on they're called 180 autos, which is you're in a flight pattern and they basically want you to land behind you. So first thing is collective down, pitch the nose forward 100 knots. Then you basically just come in for landing in an auto rotation. And it's full control. But I think, it was just a reaction for him. And plus he was loaded. He had 5 people on board, so he was heavier than normal. It was low on fuel, but if it comes out that he had no fuel, But the one thing I noticed when the aircraft was falling head down or rotor head down, the rotor system wasn't turning. So
Yeah.
in any case, it was the engine failure. Whatever happened, it was an engine failure.
Yeah, well, if he ran out of fuel, I mean, they should be able to tell that too. They should be able to see there was no fuel. I mean, granted, it got
Yeah,
seawater and stuff, but I'm sure they could still be able to tell there's no fuel in the lines or
right,
like that. But yeah, I was. I mean, again, that I think that's what caught everyone by surprise. It wasn't just that the plane, the helicopter fell out of the sky, but it's like it's missing its main rotor, it's missing a tail boom, like all that happened in an instant. I mean, they just don't. I mean, yeah, you may have something go bad in one piece, but I mean, they just don't fall apart for no reason, you
right,
know.
right. It will fall apart, and the boom won't just fall apart. He would have known if it was a tail rotor issue, which is another emergency procedure. You're cruising along, all of a sudden you have no pedal, which basically you get a tail rotor fixed. Basically, you got no control. That's another reason why you do an auto rotation in order because if not, the aircraft if you add power, the aircraft goes into a spin. So you
Right.
basically take the load out of the rotor system and you start an auto rotation, which and then at the end is where you have to worry about the aircraft, you know, going into a spin because eventually you're going to have to put that load back into the rotor system and the aircraft will go into a spin because you
Right.
got no tail.
You got no
But
tail to counteract the turn of
yeah,
the
to counteract the torque. So it's one and the same. But I was just so surprised. I was like, wow, that thing actually, it's almost like it got shot out of the sky.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that's what it looked like. It's just no rotor blades. I mean, nothing. There wasn't even no rotor blade, and it's upside down, falling out of the sky. I was just like, oh wow, I've never seen that before.
That's what I thought too. It was just a fuselage coming down. It was like it got hit by something and just shot. But it was kind of like the one in Philadelphia, that medevac jet. I mean, that thing came down so hot and fast that it looked like a damn missile coming in. I mean, it was
Right.
I was like, dang, ISIS got one. Like they got over here. How they're dropping missiles in Philadelphia, you know.
Yeah, it almost seemed like it was shot down. They show all those videos, but if it wasn't for the videos, that would have been just a weird.
Yeah,
A weird
there's the one from the New York City side. I'm sorry, from the New Jersey side, on top of a building that gave the best image of it, just because you watch the whole thing happen in real time. I mean, a lot of the first ones where you saw it falling and you see the main rotor blade coming down, but which I don't think they found yet. But there's the one from the Jersey side where you just watch it happen right in front of you, and it just it's not clear enough or zoomed in enough to see a lot of the specifics, but it doesn't hide. I mean, you just watch it come apart. So
that
yeah,
and then coming apart was you won't tell because the rotor system it's he's doing the flare obviously collective down the nose pitches up the collective down and then instead of going forward he just aggravated the situation and cut his own tail off, which is
right,
one of the when you do first things they teach you in flight school is collective down cyclic forward.
yeah,
That's the collective down cyclic forward to keep you from reacting of jerking back on the rotor system or jerking back on the cyclic in order to get that airspeed down. And so you get time to get that airspeed once the aircraft starts going down.
right, yeah.
So
Well,
it's
still been air things going on. Seems like more than normal for some reason, but obviously you kind of get that perspective when the media is covering it. But I mean, I just saw 2 days ago 2 United flights in San Francisco hit wingtips on the ground. It's like, it seems just a lot of little things. I mean, there've been a couple, on the ground taxiing accidents and things like that, and I'm not sure. Maybe they need better ground guides or something. I don't know. But then you got jets flipping over in Toronto, and you got. I mean, it's just.
yes, and a lot of it is just everybody wants to get their pass. The pilots. The one thing about aviation world, it's an on time. I mean, even though they're not on time, they try to. The pilots are put to the boots. I mean, the boots are put to them to stay on time, keep going, because it's all about making money.
Right.
And the ground, a lot of the time is spent on the ground
Yeah.
and waiting your turn to land. Because getting from point A to point B, the air traffic controllers have to actually line them up, and you can get there fast, but then you're waiting.
Right. They
So
wrap
you're trying
and
to just
yeah.
play the dance, or join the dance that's going on at that airport. And
Yep.
I got to give it to the traffic controllers because that job is not easy. I've sat in those things just out of curiosity, just to watch them, and those people are busy.
Yeah, that's that has always seemed like one of the most stressful jobs that there are. I mean, it just I've that's not it is obviously not a job you can easily get real quick and be trained up and be. I mean, you can't make mistakes. I mean, you just can't. And there's hundreds of lives depending on you, and
Right.
that's got to wear on you. I mean, it's got to be up there. But
And I don't understand why they make them retire at 55 when you have the pilots retiring at 65. You
right,
know how I just don't get it because you're sitting at a screen. Okay, you got bad vision. Okay, make the screen bigger. I mean, you're still lining people up. You know, you're just sitting there. So, but then you got a guy who's 10 years older flying the aircraft.
right.
I don't get it.
A lot
You're,
of other things to look at.
yeah, I just don't understand why you retire at 55. A lot of people are at their prime at 55. You know, they're
Yeah,
just you got they call old man strength. You know, these guys are ready. It's just the way we are. We're not our dad's 55s. You know, we're different 55.
that's right.
You know,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of guys still work out. You know, do stuff, do all kinds of crazy stuff. Oh, but you're 55. Sorry, you're out. But hey, you can fly a commercial jet.
right.
You're good.
And I think private jets you can obviously go older. I think. I mean, if you're flying
Yeah,
for
I think so. I think you can, but when it comes to the you can because you can actually do your own. You just
right,
fly your own.
yeah,
So just can't fly for money. But
yeah. So you're down on near the border. You're right near the Texas border and or Mexican border and seeing a lot. I mean, I know for years now you be within 100 miles of there, and it's been pretty bad and dangerous. Um, we've seen a lot from Trump's first term through what happened during the Biden years of just open the floodgates to now over the last couple of months. Just curious on what your perspective is. What have you seen? Have you seen the difference? Have you seen the change before and after January 20th?
absolutely, it's come to a complete stop down here. I mean, I remember before, even before prior to the election, there was busloads of people, and I gotta hand this. I wouldn't really call it the administration's issue. The Biden administration is really all the NGOs that were involved. They bring these people, and they would. I mean, you'd see them at the mall. They get just dropped off. There was people just walking around the city with these bags with these tags on them, and they got money, they get money, and then they're taking Ubers. Uber drivers were getting, they were charging to drive them from here to McAllen, and another Uber to Corpus Christi, and just basically working their way up to Houston. You know, or you would have NGOs with big busloads of people just driving them up to Houston, San Antonio, and stuff. Now that's all gone. But it's all these, and then the attorney fees here. Let me give you a perfect example. I have a friend of mine who married a Mexican national. When they got married legal, they're going through the process of immigration. A lawyer would charge during the Biden administration. The lawyer was charging $8,000 to get this person their immigration status. They're married. I
Right.
mean, $8,000, and it's only like $1,500 application, and then there's another. It's total to get your application. It's maybe about $2,500 if you do it yourself. But an attorney was charging an additional $8,000, and from what I was told, when these people were coming across, they were charging up to $10,000, $15,000 to help these people get their immigration status.
To
So the
be
people down here, and there was commercials, hundreds, almost like political ads here. All these lawyers, ambulance cases, talking about if you need help, we'll help you out. And it was, it's a lot of money was being made down here. It was
right.
all about money, moving these people for money. You
And it
know,
was just to kind of make them legal per se.
well, to help them, they would the NGO would sponsor them. The attorney would file their paperwork, and of course, just like Medicare, they'll charge more because if you're going the right way, they're going to charge you, $6,000-7,000. And the prices are still high. But then if you're an illegal immigrant trying to do some kind of status work, it was almost 10 grand that they were charging the NGOs, and the NGOs are being paid by the government,
Right.
getting subsidies. So there was all this money being made, and it was the funny part between here and Corpus Christi. You saw more attorneys' offices pop up all over the border. That's one thing that's not talked about. All these are, and they're still everywhere. Everywhere. There's a huge increase of attorneys
Like
just
Starbucks,
showing up.
Starbucks in Seattle, just everywhere.
Yes, just same thing here.
Yeah.
But now when Trump took office, all these people just started disappearing. All these little, overnight attorney, they would call them migration chasers, because that's what they were pushing for.
Like
Help.
like an ambulance chasing attorney for
Yeah,
free. They just
yeah, they were just doing they call them immigration chasers, and that's what they do. They make a lot of money, doing this. I have friends who were attorneys, and they make money. They tell me, so. But now, since the Trump took over, I mean, it's been like a complete faucet shut down at the main spigot. I mean, there's not even a trickle of
yeah. The
of
mall back to being normal, not people walking around anywhere.
yeah, now people walking around. The lines at the bridge, 3 hours minimum to cross in a car. Um, and in Brownsville, you have three bridges. You have the old bridge, the new bridge, and then the inaugural bridge, where all the big trucks cross through. I mean, it's almost like a military base. I mean, it's just the whole border is reinforced. And I mean, and with all the whole narco thing going on, with the narcos being part of the Mexican government, the government, the Mexican government's not true, and all this, that, and the other. Well, what's happening now is all these people that had visas that are now crossing the border that have financial interest, Mexican or just non-U.S. citizens coming over from Mexico, they're getting pulled over, secondary checks, tertiary checks, and when you go into those checks, you scan phones, and they're finding a lot of people, part of the narco rings, and a lot of that is because of the money, all the money that was made. It's all cash money with all this the migrant smuggling. There's no way of putting it into the Mexican banks because the Mexican banks are just going to tax the fool out of you. So
Right.
now they're slowly trying to trickle the money into the United States, and just every day I get like these news cycles. So the mayor of Matamoros, which is the city right across the border, him and a staff of 8 came across the border Easter weekend to spend Easter down in South Padre Island because the mayor owns properties down there. Well, they already had him tagged with some kind of narco stuff. So they pulled him in, took all the phones, scanned everything, and detained him. Well, it took the mayor, or not the mayor, it took the governor of Tamaulipas, which is the state that mayor's in, of
Mhm.
that city, to ask to personally ask permission to have him released, which they only detained him just to detain him. But now this guy is a marked man with all his staff going back into Mexico.
Right.
And then yesterday they caught a couple with $184,000 of cash on them in a
Coming.
brand new Fiat. She had $30,000 on him. He had 10 on him. The vehicle was caught with, total was $184,000 cash trying to be smuggled into the United States. So now, at first was this human smuggling to the border, getting paid. Now the big thing is not drugs; it's the money. Money is being smuggled into the United States to try to get laundered into the system in order to make illegal money. And the reason why is there was two brothers. They're state representatives in Mexico. They got caught in McAllen, Texas. They they paid over 180. No, it was $250,000 in custom vehicles, jet skis, and razors. And when the money in cash money, people are paying cash there now. You know, but the money's marked as cartel money. So once I guess they do the numbers or whatever, so these people are trying to basically, if you ever watch Black Sales, where they find all that gold, but then they realize it's too much to carry the gold, so they buy diamonds and little stuff, but it's still saying that worth thing. So now they're buying stuff in order to filter this money and then sell it for cash.
And then sell it
You
for
know, and
cash.
then they sell, yeah. And then the other thing that they're doing down here is they're targeting mostly like people who entertainment folks, bartenders, dancers, the entertainment world, because a lot of them people work off of Cash App, Venmo, all these little banks, that nothing that's trackable. So what they do is
Right.
they'll give you $3,500 cash, and then you will send a Cash App payment to some parts store up in New York. So money is transferred from your bank account into that, and then that money is slowly filtered back into the banking system. So that's how a lot of people here are making extra cash. But a lot of the our entertainment world people, or our services industry, they work on cash.
Right.
So that's the big thing that's occurring now. So I sell. I do you sell. I buy and sell stuff off of Facebook Market. So whenever people give me cash, I always check. If I sold a vehicle or whatever. Now I'm making sure the money's legit money.
So you're
So
checking it to make sure it's not marked and that kind of
yeah,
stuff. Or
yeah, it's not
yeah.
marked money and it's guys, but that's the new. That's it's kind of, it hasn't made the news yet, but that's how. I have a friend of mine who, well, he does that kind of. He's got over $200,000 in cash app, in his cash app. So
Wow.
I don't ask him questions. We're friends, we're acquaintances, but he's kind of was telling me, hey, you can make money. I'm like, nope, I'm good, thanks, I'm good.
It's going to
You know,
get you.
no,
It's
I don't do cash app. I don't. It's either cash only or what's the one through the banks, through USAA. Just you
Dell and
know
that. Yeah.
Zelle,
Yeah.
trackable stuff. So yeah, it's kind of a big thing now. But that's the big thing now. The moving of money. That's
It's not.
trafficking money.
Well, it's not, at least in that area. It's not people. It's the money getting it back in the states because they're not
Yeah,
going to put it. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you got everything was done in cash. All that stuff, all the human trafficking, people were just running cash. So you have people with droves of money. What are you going to do with it? You can't spend that. You can only spend so much down there, and then
Right.
you become a target to other people to steal your money. So they're trying to buy properties and stuff. So
You think?
it's a
Yeah.
investigation.
It seems like there'd be a high risk of people wanting to knock off, watching people come north and just robbing people, thinking they have the look, or that we've seen them before. They're probably carrying a boatload of cash. It seemed like put them into a car wreck, come up on them, rob them, strip the vehicles. I mean, if someone's looking to make money, they're not from down there, that they would look to essentially money mules and knock them off. I
Well,
mean,
there's a
it's
lot
just
of that too. Even the trucks. Another friend of mine. I have a lot of friends, so I'm just don't give me any names. But he actually works for an investigation team. They caught a tractor trailer. Everything's legit on it. He was moving steel from Mexico into the United States, which is normal stuff, that commerce that takes place. Well, they just happened to scan his tanks. Well, he had a fake tank in a tank, and he had over $2 million in cash in that tank. And this is a legit company,
right.
from Mexico doing business in the United States. And he had his, I guess the driver had his tank modified specifically to move money for the cartel. And the cartels are ruthless. They'll make you. If they know you've got good credit and they know you come back and forth, they know there's people, they have scouts all over, the bridge, because, there's a lot of people that come down here work, and then they go live in Matamoros, and there's cartels that are just targeting these people. Like, you'll cross this, or we'll kill your family, or you'll do this, and slowly, and $5,000, 10,000,
Right.
So it's one of those things that you just got to be careful. I don't go to Mexico anymore. I'm not, and I just
But
live right here.
it's got to
But
be. I mean, especially over the last several years, it had to be dangerous enough living just right there. But yeah, in Mexico, it's. I mean, even most of the tourist hotspots are. You can't. Even though short of Cabo, which is probably one of the more safer ones. My buddy Toby, who's co-host here on the show. I mean, he's got a fishing charter business in Cabo, and he's got Marvita fishing and a restaurant and bar and all that. And he's explaining to me down there it's pretty safe because there's no market, right? They're surrounded by water on three sides. They keep that place pretty clean. There's nowhere to run drugs. I mean, it stays pretty. But Cancun, all those areas, PV, all those areas, I mean, they're hotbeds for cartel activity and gang
But the
activity.
cartels run it. That's
Yeah,
how they filter a lot of their money is through those businesses. A lot of the money from the cartels. Cancun is one of the safest places to vacation for Americans and European tourists because it's run by the cartels. I mean,
it's
it's
like
super safe.
the old Vegas being run by the mafia.
Yes, the cartel runs it. Everything they do, everything that's there is somehow, some way the cartel runs it or has some type of influence, and money is filtered in and out through there, into the system. Laundered money's laundered. It's just a fact, but people still go there. I mean, safe. I mean, they let the government do what the government does, but people are gonna go vacation, party, and have a good time. But
Yeah,
it's a known fact, and everybody just it's the giant elephant in the room is just whatever, none of my business. Doesn't affect me. So
it's interesting is one of the things that when this last election, one of the things that Trump, lauded was that he won all these border counties along the border for the first. A Republican won for the first time I think ever. I'm not sure, but definitely in a long time. I know I've talked to a lot of people I know that have come into this country as immigrants, legally in the right way, uh, from India, from South and Central America, all kind of, and all of them, none of them liked what was happening because all of them felt like I had to go through all those steps. I did it the right way. I paid all the money. I visited the consulate. I did the embassy, and is that did you kind of seeing him win all those counties along the border? Was that surprising, or has that kind of been what the media is not down there covering it? Was that kind
no,
of the
people
was that
know it. People knew it. Like Starr County, 100, it was 98% Democrat, turned red. Starr County, we were pink. Brownsville, like my dad is old school. Like my whole family, we were Democrats. We were old school Democrats. But here you have that conservative Democrat kind of down in here. Our representative, his name is Vicente Gonzalez. Anyways, he's a moderate, and Myra Flores almost beat him. I mean, it was tight. It was a tight race. It was maybe 1,000, like 1,800 votes. That was the kind of but I think this year, just people are done with it. They're done with this because we were getting. I mean, the local people, they were getting. We don't have enough resources for everybody, and then you're the staging area for everything.
right?
It hurt us. It hurt us a lot.
I imagine
And
safety concern. I
yeah,
mean,
safety, crashes. There wasn't a lot of violence here because the people were just because they were showing up here and they were just happy to be here. But
right.
once they got established where they were at and they got together and did the mob mentality, and then all the crime starts happening. But here it wasn't really that. It was just more of just all these people in the system and people just walking around. They would walk around and I would see them at the mall or see them downtown, and they wouldn't even look at you. They were just, they're still in that mentality, that new guy mentality.
Right. They weren't panhandling. They weren't trying to bum you for money or give you the
No,
because that's what we saw up here in New York, and that's what we see all over the country. Once they got deep into the country,
yes,
was I had a hotel right I could walk to that they put a whole bunch. When New York City overflowed, my county. I'm 7 hours from the city. My county took people in and put them in 3 or 4 hotels. One of them was right near my house, and it was they just wherever they went, Walmart here, there, whatever, they had their hands out. Right, they just expected they were giving all this free stuff, free hotel, free food.
mhm.
They expected everyone else to give them something for free, and
Yeah, we were lucky down here in the south, in Brownsville. Or in our area, we were lucky because we experienced the new guy mentality. They're just happy to be here, and they got their money, and everybody was. We were just a staging area for people to move up north. But it's the bigger once they got to the bigger cities. Big one's Austin. Austin is, I mean, it's the New York of Texas.
it is.
It's crazy there. It's just absolutely crazy, and they're underfunded, undermanned. I mean, it's that's where everybody from California goes. They go to Austin.
Yeah, I went to Austin. It's a big blue dot of Texas. I was
Yes,
just there a month
they,
ago. I'm there quite a bit because of work, and yeah, I mean, it is obviously in the way they allowed the homeless people just flocked into there because of just the rules that they made before the people stepped up and changed it. But I mean, it is right. You have Google in there, you have Tesla in there, you have a lot of California tech coming in there, but you also had a city that one defunded the crap out of their police, and
mhm.
caused a lot of them to quit and retire and just get rid of them. And then they embraced every homeless person they could get.
Yeah.
Um, and really, really ruined a lot of that city. But yeah, but I mean, between there and Houston, both Houston, I know has a huge problem.
Yeah, they're becoming, and of course, everybody's against Abbott, and all his things on what he does and this and that. But I mean, Texas is Texas. I mean, eventually Texas will rise, and these people will either, it's going to change. It's unsustainable, and but down here in Brownsville, there's a lot of construction because of SpaceX. I mean, they voted in the SpaceX city, to have a SpaceX becoming a city. So there's huge construction. There's a lot of big companies, construction business companies that come in and just buy up all the land and building. So there's a lot of work here, and there isn't a lot of people because and unfortunately, a lot of these people that came from South America don't want to work.
Right.
It's 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 sad. It's sad because they don't want to work. A lot of people just want to come here for the free handout.
Right. Everyone always acts like, oh, there's been some comments recently of like, especially from someone on the left of, why would we want to get rid of these people? Who's going to pick our strawberries? Who's going to do this? Here's do that. Yeah. If you give them stuff for free, like we saw in COVID time when they started giving handouts to everyone, people didn't want to work. They're like, I get more money by staying at home. If you're
Right.
giving them everything, they have no motivator to work short of their own pride.
Exactly. Oh, and one of the things that we had down here in South Texas was it worked for years. Back in the 90s, there was people from Mexico had visas, like work visas. They would come over, work, and then go home. And of course, they'd pay their taxes and stuff. And it was working so well that the Democratic government back then actually stopped it because it worked so well. Because there wasn't enough money being made. Just because there was all this tax revenue, but it was going to the state, not to the cities.
Ah,
See, so the locals started, they stopped it. So a lot of these, I mean, I see a lot of these people coming they got their work visas and they come and they're working pouring concrete. And I see them here. We're having construction here in my neighborhood. And I talk to them all the time. They come in, they work, and then they go home. The people who do the strawberries here, they do the onions or the corn that they're doing, they come in buses. They come in
oh,
big buses, they work, and then they go back.
yeah.
They go back over the border and they go to, but it's the right way to do it. They make big money and they have to pay their taxes and they leave. So
They they
until
do
that occurs, then
up here
I
in
mean,
very rural New York, central New York, very rural area. I hunt a lot of those areas and stuff, but a good friend of mine is a school teacher, and he was telling me, he and I were in Afghanistan together. He was telling me that, he has kids that he sees them for a few months. They come and spend 6 months a year. Their parents work the crops. They all come up together in buses, and the farmers put them up in. They're right near where I hunt. So they're single wide trailers. They put them all in and everything.
mhm,
And he has those kids like the last month or two of the school year, May and June, and then the first August, September into October, and then they leave and go back south. So he has the same kids, sees them come back to school where they get about 4 or 5 months in this school, and then they go do the rest of the time in school in Mexico, and they come back and forth. And he says they come here, their parents work, they work the 6 months of the harvest season, growing season, and then they move back. They go back to Mexico, all the way to New York.
yes, and that used to be the norm when I was growing up. I used to have that. Kids in my school, the piscas, we call them piscaderos, the people that come to work and they're in our school and then they would leave and they would come and back. But it was normal. That was just normal thing. They were just moving with the product. But now, this immigration, the way it was ruined, it ruined it for everybody. Now everybody's got to be vetted. They got to go through the process. I mean, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt. But when you open up the floodgates, you got to shut it down. I mean,
Yeah,
it's easy for people that doesn't have. That's one thing nowadays. If it doesn't affect me, it don't bother me. But until you feel the effects, or your kid's killed, or there's an accident, or there's a crime committed, and it's your family, then it's a big deal. But until then, you don't care. They don't. People don't care.
that's
It,
where
it,
and DeSantis and them made such a big difference. They made it a national problem because
yes,
they bust them and flew them and all that stuff across the country to every sanctuary city or claim they were sanctuary city. Most people would be like, "Not my problem. It's not my backyard," right? And
right.
it was dropping them off in front of Harris's house in DC, or dropping them off in downtown Times Square. They made it in Chicago and everywhere else. They made it a problem for everybody.
Well, where they dropped them off up north in that big ritzy place that they,
Oh,
kicked them
yeah.
out. All of a sudden it became a problem, and the media it switched it up. But fortunately, America, thank goodness, there's people in this that see things for what they are, and just I don't I'm not a big political guy. I guess independent, and it's just whatever who's ever doing the best for the country. That's who I'm about. You know, there's a lot of things people do that I don't like, but it doesn't matter. If it makes the country better, I'm all about it. I
Yeah.
don't go for personalities. I go for no more. I'm tired of all the talk. It's either action, 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 or just you know, you're not for me.
To me, it comes down to just common sense, right? Don't just common sense, and that's it. And it seems to me, if you can use common sense, it really doesn't matter what letter you have after your name. Just
But
just do it that way. Don't do some allegiance to whatever when that someone is not in their right mind. They should not be the president of the United States. Quit saying that they're good. Everyone knows they're good, not hiding it. Or someone is corrupt, or this is not for the best interest of the people, but your party likes it. That's and sadly, when you look at the left, Fetterman has been the most common sense guy they have, and he's the one everyone was like, how did he even get in office? Is he even mentally capable? And he's been the one that they said has bucked his party, but he's just approached it with common sense, and
yes,
not
which,
tried to.
which is funny because politics was common sense. Back in the day, it was common sense. It's what's okay. There was just you wouldn't do things that are doing the people are doing now. It just
No,
doesn't make sense. It
right.
just I mean, you could have been left or right party. Republicans were for business. It didn't matter. But you didn't do the stuff that they're doing now with
Because
all
they were
the
geared on what's best for the country, not what someone funding your party wants you to do, or
yeah. It didn't make sense. And one of the well, thank God down here, and I talked to my father passed away, and I had some of the people came to visit, and I was talking to a teacher, a good friend of mine, and I was like, hey, do we have any problem with girl or men and women's sports down here, or boys and women's sports? He's like, no, we don't. Don't have that, and I guess because it's the culture too. And we
right.
have our culture has shifted a lot down here because here was all about being macho and this and that, and it's changed a lot.
Yeah,
It's it's changed,
yeah,
So I was just wondering, but you read all over it, and it's just like, what are they doing? Like, why?
yeah.
And thank God we still have you ain't got this. How do you say? I've met some of the dumbest, most educated people in the world, and they come on TV all the time talking, and when they open their mouth, they're like, "Well, he's educated." Well, he's dumb. I
Yeah.
mean, I've met some of the dumbest educated, and obviously, education ain't a big deal because if you're that dumb, obviously, all this education, didn't do anything for you because you're
Right.
still dumb.
Passing test doesn't make you smart, and passing test doesn't give you common sense. It just
Yeah.
means you got the answers that they wanted. But well, hey, Bobby, I love you coming on tonight, and it's been a long time, 5 years. I'm glad you came back, and great catching up with you on a lot of stuff, non-military for the most part. But is there anything we haven't talked about, or anything you want to just let our listeners and viewers know of anything that's important and near and dear to your heart, anything you're part of, you want to bring awareness to?
No, not really. I just hope everybody just, when they watch the news and, when they hear all, just back and forth, just treat everything with a grain of salt and, just don't take what somebody else is telling you to do or saying to you, do your own research and when don't bring politics to the table. Don't bring money, politics, and religion to the table ever in your family.
Yeah.
And just keep at peace. If you're with someone that disagrees with you, just keep the peace. Just say, okay, Roger, whatever, and just move on because we are very divided, and hopefully, you know, like the president says, success will bring us back together. So hopefully that's what occurs.
Yeah, yeah. Enjoy those uh Thanksgiving dinners, and don't keep the uncle away, or or not get
Right.
together. Like I say, you
Yeah.
don't have to talk about that stuff, because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, none of that stuff matters when someone's laying on their deathbed and you wish you would have spent more time or said this thing or whatever, right?
That's correct. Just don't
Oh,
keep all that. If you disagree with somebody, it's okay. He's still your family.
that's
You
it.
know, your
That's it.
family comes first, because without your family, you don't have anything. And there's plenty of people out there who wish to have their family.
That's
So,
right.
yeah.
Well, hey, thank you again, Bobby, for coming on. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in here on this Thursday night. Be sure and tune in. Follow us all our socials. And thank you for giving us some of your night, and for those watching after the fact. Everyone have a good week, and we'll see you all next week.
God bless.
Thank you, buddy.